Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been given 35 minutes to unpack your book, and it's really my honor and my privilege to have this conversation about your incredible book. Let me start by reading out the epitaph which is written on the Kohima War Cemetery. It's by the Greek poet Simonides. And it goes, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today." So Kikon, your book is very much about the siege of Kohima by the Japanese invaders during Second World War and how the Naga response in collaboration with the Allied forces drove the Japanese away and was a decisive battle for the victory of the Allied forces in the Second World War. But beyond that, you actually start by charting out the colonial encounter of the Nagas over some 46 years that the British took to establish Kohima as their headquarters. So why do you begin with this? Why was it important for you to start from there?
Thank you, Namgay. And I would like to, before I respond, thank the Bhutan Echoes for inviting me to discuss this book of mine, which came out last year. And again, before I respond, I would like to start with two disclaimers. Ever since I landed in Thimphu, I've been getting this vibe, because my book is titled His Majesty's Headhunters, so everyone's thinking that it's about your Majesty. And I've had some people question me even, whether we still hunt heads. So I want to give this disclaimer that when I was thinking of a title for this book, I was thinking of the rulers who were seated at the time when the British Empire was in this part of the world. And also during the Second World War, about the emperor who was seated in Japan. So, in 1832, when the East India Company first came to the Naga Hills, the King of England was King William IV. And in 1944, when the Battle of Kohima happened, the King of England was King George VI. And at that time, again, the Japanese were ruled by Emperor Hirohito. So I was thinking, all of them were contesting for the heart of the Naga headhunters. So I thought I'll give it as, a bit of irony and also to represent the periods. So I used the title His Majesty's Headhunters because of that. There was no thought of Bhutan at that point of time. And we gave up our practice of headhunting a long time back, 175 years ago. So we don't headhunt anymore. So just want to make that clarification. When the British first came, they came as part of the East India Company. They were not interested in the Naga Hills, but the Naga warriors were disturbing their economic activities. They were in the northeast because those days it was the Assam Valley. They were interested in their natural resources there and to collect revenue because we had oil, tea, and other mineral resources. And they were also interested in looking for a route which is easier, shorter to Myanmar, so that they'll go there. That time it was called Burma. From there, they wanted to go to China. So I don't understand why they didn't think of a shorter route from Bhutan but to China. But they were interested in a shorter route. And today, people know that route as National Highway 39, which goes from Dimapur via Kohima to Imphal. So initially, a survey party came. But when the survey party came, the history of that region was, somehow unexplored. The East India Company was interested in chasing the Burmese away from Assam and Manipur, because they had conquered Assam and Manipur around that time. So they formed alliances with the Ahom kings and also the Manipuri kings, and they were able to defeat the Burmese army and chase away the Burmese from Assam and Manipur. And they signed a treaty of Yandabu at that point of time. So that treaty effectively gave part of western and northern Burma to the East India Company. And that time the British Empire had not sent their civil servants towards Assam or that part of the world. And just to give you a little bit of present-day geography, although Chittagong and Sylhet were is part of the present-day Bangladesh, those days there was no Bangladesh. Bangladesh was created in 1971 only. So they were also administered from Assam by the British Empire. So one of the reasons why I wrote this book is, the classic African proverb, and it really fits this particular book that I've written. Until the lion tells his tale, the hunter will always be the hero. So in every book that I've read about the Battle of Kohima, about the Second World War, about this particular region, because a lot of British and American historians have written about the Burma campaign. And this was a significant period in the history of the world. In fact, the British Army War Museum had done a survey and found that, and the survey they found that they considered the Battle of Kohima as the greatest battle ever fought and won by the British Empire, over and above the Battle of Waterloo. So a lot of these books went into the details of which British army brigade or battalion came and fought in what manner and won the war for the British Empire. Remember that when they fought the Battle of Kohima in 1944, as opposed to in 1832 when the East India Company came to that region, at that time they had already won the Battle of Waterloo. The British Empire was on its zenith. They were militarily a stronger force. They had conquered half the world. But in 1944, their glory and their strength was on the wane. In every British brigade, there will be one Gorkha battalion. And in fact, I realized that they want to take the glory of the Battle of Kohima from the natives. There were two communities which were instrumental in ensuring that the British won this war, which changed the course of world history. I say this because the Japanese had already conquered Malaya, Singapore, and they had come to Burma and taken over Burma, and this was their onward campaign. How it happened is a chapter in the book which I discuss as well. There was this discussion with our nationalist leader, the founder of Indian National Army, Subhash Chandra Bose. And it's rumored that Bose came with the British Army, especially with General Sato, who had come from the Japanese Imperial Army and stationed in Kohima. So I thought that the narrative has always been against the natives, but in the Battle of Kohima, the casualties were more on the native side. A lot of Nagas suffered. And in the end, the glory went to the hunters. So it was time. When I read all this book, I felt that, taking a cue from Toni Morrison, who said that if you want to read a book and it hasn't been written, you got to write it. So, and I looked at many books that are available, the scholarly works as well, but nothing has been comprehensively written on this. But a chapter or a book on the Battle of Kohima is not complete if you don't look at the colonial history of the British Empire in the Naga Hills. Why I say this? Because when they came, they were searching for a route, but they did not expect that the Naga headhunters will fight them back. If there was the first mutiny, Sepoy mutiny of 1857, if there was Anglo-India war, there was also an Anglo-Naga war in the hills of the Naga people. And it took the British Empire 46 years with their modern day weaponry, with their Enfield rifles, to actually establish a administrative headquarters in the Naga Hills in what is now today known as Kohima. But then, history is usually written as a chronological, event, a series. And sometimes it's narrated in the, narrated about the actors, the dates. But I wanted to look at what were the ideas, or what were the thoughts, what was the culture, what was the tradition that drove that interaction between the British Empire, the mighty British Empire, and the Naga headhunters. So I was very clear that I have to write about that section, which is the first section of the book, is the interaction between the British and the Nagas. And then only after that, I looked at the 3 months of the Battle of Kohima, which significantly, I feel, changed the course of world history.
Incredible. So I'll also tell you one of my favorite lines from your book. You write, "The Nagas were people who did not take sides for the sake of empire, but for their own survival." And as you just mentioned, the headhunting culture very much figures into that. So I'll read out some excerpts from your book. So in one of your chapters, you make a reference to John Butler, who in 1847 said, "On the question being once put to the Naga whether they would like to become subjects of the company, they promptly replied, 'No. We could not then cut off the heads of men and attain renown as warriors, bearing the honorable marks of our valor on our bodies and faces.'" You also write then, "Decapitating with the right blow of the Tao, or headhunting, was the most significant art of warfare practiced by the Nagas from the ancient times right up until 1994. But as we were talking before our session, the ethos, the philosophy, the energy of what headhunting means for the Nagas still lives on, and it very much influenced how they responded first to the British and then to the Japanese forces. So tell us a little more about that.
The Nagas were animist, and headhunting was at the center, at the core of our religious and also cultural belief as animist. I say this because, and I want to relate to modern times. My niece is 13 years old. She read my book, and she was shocked. How were we headhunters, And she's into Roblox and all other video games. She's not aware of her, past or the past of history. So, it was important for me to write a chapter on the practice of headhunting because in the past it defined our animistic traditions and it drove our quest for self-preservation as a race. We were small people in the hills. I'll just briefly describe what was headhunting. Headhunting obviously was cutting off the heads with our dao, which was like, it's like the machete. It's like a sword, but it's more, it's coarser, but hardy as well. And decapitating the head was necessary, essential act if you wanted to be a Naga warrior. And in our society, and when I say this, I want to again give a disclaimer. I'm not promoting headhunting because it seems so sometimes. So, in the society, if a man wanted to get married, he cannot take a bride if he had not decapitated an enemy's head. And it was like the rites of passage for a Naga warrior. It was our warrior's way. And for us, headhunting was something natural. It was part of the society. We were living in isolation. And we believe that the spirit of a man or a person lies in the head. So if I don't go and cut the head and bring the head, then I have not actually defeated my enemy thoroughly. So unless I bring the head, I don't qualify as a Naga warrior, nor as a member of the society. So that was the philosophy behind it. There's another practice which our ancestors did. Before the British came, our warriors used to go from what is now called the Kohima district to Chittagong, to Sylhet, to either trade for salt or to kidnap slaves. And a slave is usually exchanged for 20 packets of salt. But they believe that all the heads they cut. So they keep the skull of the heads on the front of their house, and they keep it as a memento. And the number of skulls you have determines the position you have in the society. So it's a merit-based society. I was very democratic. And the more the number of heads you have, the more respected you are in the society. I mean, that was the ancient Naga headhunters. But it had a spiritual attachment. If you bring the head, it was believed that your ancestors will, in the next life, be served by those heads you have taken, by the spirit of those heads you have taken. So that was one of the concepts. So I thought that headhunting was, the same thing as anybody will react when you first hear of the word headhunting. But there was much more meaningful, deeper meaning into the practice of headhunting. So it was essential because the process of headhunting required our warriors to avenge the death of any heads taken by the enemy. If not today, even after 40 years, the warriors used to avenge the dead. Without avenging the dead, your spirit will not have peace in the afterlife. That was the belief. So revenge was also ingrained in the philosophy of headhunting. I myself am surprised to know about this when I researched and when I asked people around. The other thing was, even today, I understand this because our warriors went and attacked any and everybody, not because they were attacking us, but we wanted to kidnap slaves, we wanted to trade, and they found that the British coming and planting tea in their fertile places were a nuisance. So British were causing a nuisance to the Naga people, so they went and actually kidnapped their workers who they had brought all the way from central India. So, the fact that revenge was part of the headhunting philosophy also led to another concept, which is that Nagas did not understand the concept of surrender. If you go and fight a war, you either kill or be killed. And I see that although we have stopped this practice a long time back, in 1999, and I say this with pride, a senior of mine in school joined the Indian Army. He was a captain in the Indian Army, and there was a Kargil war. So there was a particular hill where the Pakistanis were firing on our army, and he had led his platoon there. And he realized that we cannot just go and fight if we don't take over that particular hill. So he took off his shoe in the snow, climbed up, and killed the officers. In the process, he was also killed. And he was awarded the second highest military honor in India, Mahavir Chakra. And he was a senior of mine. And in college, he was very spiritual. He was a Christian. And Christianity practices concept of non-violence. But I think the spirit of the Naga headhunter, and apparently in the story I read about him later, his great-grandfather was a great headhunter from their village. So he used the kukri, the Gorkha kukri, to kill the Pakistani soldiers and capture that particular position and sacrifice his life. So I think even till date, even though headhunting has stopped, the spirit can be revived. That is what I think.
Yes, absolutely. And it was so important for a Naga to tell this story because, as you previously mentioned, there are many narratives about the war, about who your people are, but you took this as an opportunity to write a book that you've always wanted to read. And to that point, I've been thinking about what we've been discussing here at the festival in the last 2 days. It's been a lot about there was a session with Pop Doji and Dr. Doji Wangchuk on what it means to be a Bhutanese. The session yesterday on AI and human intelligence, where Sonam Pelden asked, what would it mean for Bhutan to be part of this larger narrative, this larger global narrative on AI, emerging tech? So to our audience here today, I see many Bhutanese. what would you say about the importance of us telling our own stories?
I think it's very important as a people to tell our own stories from our own perspective, to actually reclaim the narrative. It's very important because it's part of who you were, your identity. And I felt that in the present times, I mean, India is a big country. There are so many communities in India. And Northeast is just one part of India. We have only 46 million people in the Northeast. And, when I was writing this book, I met a lot of elders whose stories I wanted to write. And there was one particular story which intrigued me. The Japanese came in the month of April, 1944. In fact, if you go to that village where they first came, they have written on their one of their walls, 4444. That's 4th April 1944. So on the 13th of April, when they first came, they were successful in taking some portion of Kohima. At the end of the war, of course, the whole of Kohima village, Kohima town, Naga villages there around Kohima were battered, and there was there were no houses left. We had to rebuild the town. The violence was not always physical. If you look at the colonial past, I talk about that as well. So, when you talk about identity, today Battle of Kohima is recognized all over the world, especially war historians know about the Battle of Kohima. But the word Kohima itself is not indigenous to our people. It was a name given to us by the Britishers because they were very bad at pronouncing our names. So if I'm bad at, speaking English, I don't mind because they were worse. And then they were not only bad at pronouncing the names of our places, but they were also bad at pronouncing our names. So a lot of times they will ask the neighbors who these people were across the hills. And usually, neighbors have bad names for each other among Nagas. So some names were like, they were thieves, they were killers, because they were fighting against each other. So usually the British Empire documented all those, and it became part of their official document. So reclaiming our narrative is also a process of reclaiming our names, who we call ourselves, how we call ourselves. And it's very important for us because it's a process that we start only later on after the British left, long gone now. So the violence, as I said, was not just the physical violence, but also the violence of naming people.
And that was really the aha moment for me when I was reading your book, because I could really resonate what you were trying to do in the context of what perhaps we are experiencing as Bhutanese people now, especially in terms of really defining who we are and where we want to go. With that, I'm being mindful of time. We started 5 minutes later, so I would like to seek the permission to take 5 extra minutes from our time. I'll open up the floor for maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Before that, can I add one
Yes,
point?
yes.
If you look at Northeast, we have had a very turbulent history, both pre-colonial and post-colonial. And in the process, this is like, Thimphu is just half an hour by flight from Guwahati. We just fly. It's, since I've been listening for the past 2 days about the peaceful place, the gross national happiness, everything is so interesting, so intriguing, so inspiring as well. Whereas just across the border, we've been trying to solve our own issues. But when we were younger than now, when we were like in school, we grew up in an atmosphere of fear and violence. So peace to us, coming to a place like Bhutan, it's so inspiring. An atmosphere where we can use your creativity, your genius, and explore it to the fullest. So that's one takeaway I have, and that's one impression I have which will stay with me. I wanted to add that.
Thank you, thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, Latasha Benji.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Rajiv tells me that I'm a headhunter too. But I had a friend called Nimatsari Krime from Arunachal Pradesh. I used to have a friend called Nimatsari Krime from Arunachal Pradesh. And he used to tell me that on the eastern parts of Arunachal Pradesh, in those days, this was the late 80s, early 90s, that they still had people, Nagas, who used to headhunt. And every time they used to smoke a lot of opium, and every time he got married and had a new wife, to make his wife happy, he would go and get a head. I hope that doesn't happen anymore.
Good question. I need to dispel that. I mean, as late as 1990, there are like stray incidences of headhunting. There was one fight in Myanmar border between two communities. It was sensationalized by the BBC. I think that's what they do. So there was a case which is an isolated case. But I'm talking about Nagas in general. We don't practice headhunting. People ask me, what weapons did the Bhutanese use in the 19th century? And again, people tell me maybe the bow and arrow, the spear perhaps. Nagas also used the spear, the bow, the dao, and the bow and arrow at that time. But these days, and I say this with a little bit of sarcasm, the weapons have been replaced by Kalashnikovs. So, the government of India and our neighbors are trying our best to resolve those issues. But in Arunachal Pradesh, there are 3 districts where the Nagas are, Tirap, Changlang, and Longding. So the Konyak Nagas are there. So the Konyak tribe is the largest Naga tribe. They are also called the tattooed headhunters because they tattoo their body. I went to Patkai Hills, which is bordering Burma once in 2001, and I met one, they call the village chief. The Konyaks have the concept of village chief, the Ang. And his face was fully tattooed. And my friend that time was telling me, a doctor who was working there, that if you meet this fellow in the night alone, you will be horrified. I mean, it's really scary. The Konyaks are in Nagaland, in Mon district, in Tirap Changlang, and their major part of their tribe is in Myanmar. It's in the northwest of Sagaing division of Myanmar. So, and there are 6 Naga MPs there in the previous Myanmar government. And even the Rajya Sabha MP from Nagaland is a Konyak lady. So they will be exaggerated stories. I don't think it's practiced because it's illegal. If you cut a head, you will go to jail.
Perhaps one more question. We're almost close to finishing. Last, all the way in the back.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. There is not much that is known about the Nagas, and in fact, I wanted to ask you regarding the Nagas who live on the other side of the border, that is Myanmar. But since you have already talked about the tattoos and things like that, yeah, okay. There is also this practice of, say, wearing gold heads, which kind of symbolize the number of heads that one person has cut. Could you kind of elaborate on that? That's one. 2, in the modern day, we hear that, I read a book by a British anthropologist where he goes on to talk about, the Great Hornbill Festival that is conducted in Nagaland, and in place of the head, something else is used, and the Nagas celebrate the Great Hornbill Festival with much fanfare, is what we are told. If you could tell us your insights on that, yes.
Thank you for the question. We recreate the past, but we don't cut heads to recreate that. So it's just symbolic. You're right. When I was writing this book, and I said that I want this as the cover of my book. This is a painting sketched by Lieutenant Woodthorpe, who was there in the 19th century as part of the British military. Came to conquered Naga Hills. And his officer, the captain, was killed by somebody from my tribe. And, he sketched all this, and this is kept in because of the anthropologists who also doubled up as, political agents in the Naga Hills. They took it to a place called the Pitts River Museum in Oxford University. And my publisher took 2 months to get permission to use this, as a cover of my book. And I was like outraged. Because there's a process going on by the Pitts River Museum to repatriate some of the artifacts we had, especially some skulls that the British colonial officers took back to UK. And this is an initiative between the anthropologists today and also with the Pitts River Museum. So it's an interesting part of history, but the artifacts remain there. There are certain communities like the Konyaks want to bring those back because the skulls they took, some people identified as the skulls of their ancestors. But some people, especially those who hunted those skulls and kept it, want it because it's their ancestors' property. So there's a contestation, but definitely this process has brought to light a lot of issues that you just mentioned. And in the light of the Hornbill Festival, we are going to celebrate the 25th anniversary this year. Is to showcase the different tribes' colorful culture. We have a lot of songs and dances, in all our festivals. Every tribe celebrates their harvest festival rigorously, and it's a very colorful festival. So in this Hornbill Festival, we attempt to showcase all this in one particular location near Kohima. So this year we're going to have the 25th anniversary, and it's symbolic. It's just to showcase the culture.
And hope to see you at the festival real soon. I myself am planning to go.
I want to visit all of you to come.
And with that, we must close the session now. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been such a riveting conversation, and thank you for being a great